The world of D&D is truly a magical place, not just because of all the literal magic, but also because while you're venturing through dungeon halls, forgotten forests, and other mysterious locales, everything's trying to fucking kill you. It's not just the traps, the curses, or the horrible monsters, even the plants want to see you dead. And I'm not just talking about the obvious plant monsters like shambling mounds or the blight family. There are straight up monsters that are more or less just plants who watched an episode of Dexter and said, could be me. Now I've covered an evil tree or two in the past on this channel, and today we're gonna be talking about yet another member of the tree that wants to kill you in a kinda messed up way family, the Death's Head tree. Suppose I probably could have just gone with a family tree joke there, huh? Now this creature ain't just a horrifying plant monster. It merely existing has some wild implications, and it's got a surprisingly weird history within the game. The creature's first appearance was in 2nd edition D&D as part of the Ravenloft Monstrous Compendium 3, Creatures of Darkness. Here it was depicted as something akin to a large oak tree with spindly branches, some of which ended in what appeared to be the severed head of a humanoid creature. The heads mostly just hang around, lying dormant, that is, until someone gets close enough for them to activate, and once activated, they would try to solve the tree's biggest problem. It should come as no surprise that this creature's diet is primarily made up of blood, which it generally acquires by killing other creatures and drinking it up through its roots like a kid with a crazy straw. However, as a tree, it can't exactly move around. That's firmly beyond the purview of this arboreal menace, so instead of going on the hunt, it has to lure in its prey somehow. And this is where the heads come in. The tree is able to animate the heads just enough to coax them into speaking. In a subdued, uncanny tone, the heads will cry out for help, hoping to attract anyone nearby who might be within earshot. And once the curious individual gets close enough to the tree to see what the that's all about, it fully animates, using its branches to smash its prey and hopefully feed on the remains. The creature can also cause one of the heads to detach itself from the branch, wherein it becomes a death's head. Now, if you're not familiar with what a death's head is, basically, they're flying decapitated heads of humanoid creatures that zip around and do spooky stuff, like bite you and implant death's head seeds in the wound. That's right, this bad boy propagates by using the heads to bite a creature who is fleeing the tree, hoping that eventually the creature will die from the resultant affliction and grow into a new tree on the spot their body falls. So kind of like how normal trees drop little seeds and nuts on the ground, but terrible, and nothing at all like that. Now this wouldn't be the only time this creature saw print, though it would go pretty much under the radar until Dragon Magazine 292, published in 2002, brought it back for 3rd edition. The artwork here is a bit of a departure, taking something of a new take on the creature from its 2E depictions. Now the heads were all skulls, which is way less disturbing and, to be honest, kinda weird. The entire stat block actually isn't really a faithful interpretation of the original, but a totally different monster using the same name. I mean, it legally has the heads insofar as there are skulls present, but there are no weird disassociating humanoid faces, so I feel like that doesn't count. The skulls are actually little seed pods now, and it can wiggle around a lot faster. And the seed pods are like little bombs that stun you. I don't really know what's going on here, and if it weren't for a very special book, truly the idea of the Death's Head tree would have died on the glossy pages of this magazine. In 2021, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft was released to mixed opinions, and I won't bother getting into all that, but whether you hate it or love it, something you have to admit is that this book loves to bring up the concept of a monster and then not actually give you game rules about that monster. The most notorious instance of this was, of course, the Bagman, one of the coolest creature concepts I'd seen in a while, which they hype up with his own legend and multiple pieces of artwork and then basically just say, yeah, use a troll stat block or whatever. I mean, there's a little more to it than that, but I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole again. I already did that for half an hour 3 years ago when I crawled out of a trash bag. I don't know what it is about this book and me doing stupid bits that require a lot of costuming, but here we are. Anyways, the Death's Head tree received basically the same treatment. Van Richten's guide, page 232, there's some kick-ass artwork of a Dullahan colloquially known as the Headless Horseman, charging forward with a bunch of death's heads. If you don't know the story of the Headless Horseman, you probably are at least aware of the broad strokes, and I think attaching the death's head to a Dullahan is honestly a really clever idea narratively. It's thematic. It's a good chance to build up on some lore and D&Dify a really popular ghost story. However, I've got beef with this entry for the same reason I made a whole ass video about the Bagman. The Death's Head tree, the progenitor of the Death's Head, doesn't have a stat block. Instead, it is relegated to a short paragraph that basically just says, oh yeah, these guys totally come from an evil tree, so just use the stats for an awakened tree and they grow some heads sometimes. It's so weird. Like, why even include the Death's Head tree as part of the creature's entry if you just don't want to give it a stat block or bespoke lore entry of its own? Like, yeah, sure, it's not the most complicated monster in the world, but you did 'em dirty. You did 'em dirty, and I won't stand for it. This little paragraph doesn't talk about the fact that the Death's Head tree uses the voices of its heads to lure people in. It doesn't talk about how they only grow in places where the accursed ground has been drenched in blood, such as the location of a great battle or ritual sacrifice. It doesn't tell you about the scholarly debates that happen in-world about whether or not the heads are sentient or if they're just simply being manipulated by the tree towards a facsimile of awareness. And it sure as hell doesn't get into the fact that the heads growing on the main tree may or may not be a grim reflection of the people whose blood fed its winding roots, allowing the accursed thing to exist in the first place. But that's why I'm here. So we're gonna get into how all of its abilities work and spend some time unraveling just exactly what this tree truly is. The Death's Head tree is a CR8 monster, but honestly, this creature's challenge rating isn't super important. In a big group, they're gonna be a problem for a higher level party, and a single individual could be a massive problem for a tier 1 party, but the true danger here is gonna scale wildly depending on how the players react to seeing this thing. They've got a slam attack that deals a pretty solid amount of damage, but of course the biggest threat is their weird head fruit. They have a bonus action called Uncanny Screams, which allows them to cry out for help using one of their heads and force a creature who can hear them within 120 feet to make a wisdom save. If you fail that save, you're frightened of the tree, but unlike how this usually works, you are compelled to get as close to the tree as possible with a sickening fascination. The frightened condition doesn't stop you from attacking the tree, though it does still impose disadvantage, but most importantly, it gets you within whomping distance. The tree can also hurl one of the heads on its branches at a target as a ranged attack, which does some bludgeoning damage, but more importantly allows the now severed head to roll into initiative and attack the tree's enemies alongside it. If the tree takes damage, it can also cause 1d4 of its heads to pop off as a reaction and immediately spring into battle, which I think is super fun. I also gave the tree a trait called Fallow Fruit, which is more or less just a codification of how many heads the tree starts with in battle and how fast they regenerate. Also, I didn't include this on the main stat block, but I was sure to include a sidebar so that if you want to use the horrific seed germination method, that is the tree biting your party members and turning them into compost, there is an entire optional rule you can throw in right there. I'm sure upstanding members of society like you would never do that, but hey, it's there if you need it. You should do it. Now, in terms of how you would actually use this creature at the game table, I truly believe that maybe more than any other tree monster I've covered, the Death's Head tree has a bunch of use cases. Perhaps your heroes are from a small village, and there have been Death's Heads causing carnage in and around the town as of late. They're only CR1 half, so it's something a few low-level heroes can't solve. But let's say they track the creatures to their source, and sure enough, a Death's Head tree has reached maturity in the forest nearby. This is a problem they will have a bad time trying to solve if they jump headfirst into battle, but it also can't really move, so they've got some breathing room. While they're dealing with all the Death's Heads, do they just burn the forest down? Fling rocks at it with a catapult from far away? There are tons of ways I can imagine them handling this, and I love to give my players an open-ended problem just to see what batshit crazy ideas the little gremlins come up with. And what happens after they destroy it? Does it just wither away? Or was the tree actually sealing away the corpse and spirit of a Doulahan, which is now tearing its way across the countryside because they destroyed the tree grave? Speaking of the Headless Horseman, there are a lot of ways you could roll him into all of this as well. Maybe a Doulahan is keeping a garden of Death's Head trees, a foul grove of plants that house all the souls which once belonged to the Doulahan's victims. Perhaps he was once an old soldier, mercilessly slain in battle against the armies of an invading kingdom hundreds of years ago. So now, he stalks the forest and the roads nearby, hunting the ancestors of that invading kingdom, who now occupy his homeland. The residents may be completely oblivious to the Doulahan's origins, and it may fall on the players to do some investigating in order to find a way to exorcise the undead creature and free the souls trapped within his grove. One of these trees is also an invaluable resource for a necromancer who wishes to use the heads as minions. The guy could literally just go wandering through his little garden where he keeps his Death's Head tree, shears in hand, ready to harvest the tree's fruit and of course feed the tree a bucket or two of blood to keep it happy. Honestly, the more I think about it, this feels exactly like the kind of thing a hag might do. A hag using Death's heads as her eyes and ears in the land surrounding her lair is a perfect use for both the tree and its severed heads. But however you choose to use this monster, I'm just glad to have a version of it in 5th edition that isn't a paragraph and a sidebar about another monster. If you do want to use my 5e stats, you can always find a link to them in the description down below. And if you're one of my lovely patrons, over on the Dungeon Dad Patreon page, you can find the high-res PDF stat block with all that fancy layout and new artwork done this week by Atomic Ink, which I had a lot of fun working with him on. I feel like he crushed it and managed to somehow incorporate elements from all the different interpretations of this creature, which is really fun. Even the weird skull one. I also gotta give a massive shout out to this week's randomly selected Patron of the Week. Thank you so much to Solar Molar for your cosmic and wise support of this show. I appreciate you. And thank you so much for watching. As always, if there's a monster from a previous edition of Dungeons & Dragons you would like to see show up on this show, let me know in the comments down below or over in the Monster Suggestions channel on the Dungeon Dad Discord, and who knows, you might just see it show up in an episode of Monster of the Week. That's this show, I think. Also, I want to thank all of you for the many comments about various beasts that might fill the final slot of our summer of catching up on monsters I haven't talked about in a while. You guys sent in so many good recommendations, and honestly, not only do I have a beast for next week's video, I've got a couple in the chamber so that down the road, if we want to talk about beasts again, we've got a few of them. So if you made a good suggestion and you knew it was the sickest beast of all time and it doesn't end up being the one we talk about next week, there's a really good chance it is on my beast list, which is like a separate thing I have made now. You might still see it show up within the calendar year. No promises, but hey, what are you gonna do? I think I found a beast, or maybe even two, that we'll see in the next video. Anyways, that's all I got for you this week. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.